Okay, so hello everyone and welcome to yet another PTC Talks, where we are excited by having Hans Loos and Kathleen Merson from Accenture here for a session about empowering engineering transformation with ALM and Generative AI. But first, a very quick introduction by me. My name is Torbjörn Peterson and I'm the Alliance Manager for PTC here in the Nordics, leading the PTC Talks, where we invite customers and partners for some inspiration on digital transformation to see what is possible and how to make it all happen. And we are running these webinars on Fridays, same time, with topics around either manufacturing, services, or engineering. And you may find also the recordings from the past sessions in the registration site. The agenda for today is a quick overview of PTC by me, and then Hans and Kathleen will run the show and touch base on a few challenges, how to address these, and then some of the business outcomes. And at the end, we're also having a Q&A session, so please keep your questions to them. You may also put them in the chat during the session, and we will pick them up later. Next slide, please. So just a very quick overview about PTC. PTC is a global software company with over 40 years of innovation with a headquarters in Boston, and we are serving a lot of different kinds of customers worldwide, from industries such as automotive, life sciences, industrial, aerospace and defense, electronics and high-tech, and retail and consumer goods, where PTC offers solutions to help business to design and produce and operate and maintain the products more efficiently through the product lifecycle. And to make all this happen, we are working through a lot of strategic partners like Accenture. So now over to you guys.
Cool, thank you, Torbjörn. Welcome also from my side. My name is Hans Loos. I'm based out of Göteborg in Sweden. What we're going to talk about today is how to use an ALM implementation as a cornerstone for an entire engineering transformation. And let's dive in right away. So let's imagine you recently picked a new ALM solution, or you're looking to make a choice. Why? I mean, you want to harmonize your requirements in one system. You want to manage your variants in a better way. You want to enable traceability to meet requirements, etc. You name it, right? So now the question is, what do we do? So the implementation alone is already a huge undertaking. So in the case of some of the tools that we have in R&D, moving thousands of engineers and downstream users to a new tool is a huge effort already in itself, right? Some engineers are senior enough and still around to remember the last big transformation, which was 10, 50, maybe even 20 years ago. This is as long as they've worked with the old tool. But now you basically bought all those licenses and you don't know what to do. And a little bit of a tunnel vision sets in, right? You set something in motion that starts being more like a lift and shift, right? And these points of time, however, bring a huge opportunity to pause and rethink how we're doing things overall, right? So how do we do this? We see this as a transformation journey, right? So, and on paper, it looks quite easy, right? So we sit in this boat, start the journey. Basically, first thing we look at is what are the challenges that we face today? What are the challenges that we want to overcome? Then after that, we set the direction. Where do we want to go? And then we basically start the implementation. So sounds easy, right? Of course, three easy steps. We start sailing and then we meet, lo and behold, what we call the complexity beast. Just looking already at the implementation, right? So I mentioned before, you have been working with this tool many years. Engineers are really used to the user interface. They've grown to optimize it, really know where to click, what to do. So how would it change, right? Then you obviously build a lot of customization around that old solution that you have. Is this something that's going to be lost? Of course, right? You want to keep it. The question is, how do you cope with that? And then, of course, you have like a huge own ecosystem of applications and tools, right? And infrastructure that you're already using. So the question there is, what will integrate? What can be harmonized, right? How can we pick up speed and basically unify all this, what we almost call like a zoo of tools that we see in many OEMs? And that's including, of course, a big decision, what's on-prem, what's in the cloud, right? What cloud to use, etc. And then, which is shown here with this lateral circle, where do we start, right? What's my proof of concept? What's my proof of value? Where do I begin? And go into an MVP, and then basically go the entire journey from left to right until we basically then sunset eventually the current system that we have. So that's already a huge complexity just alone on the system implementation. But then basically there's a lot of other things when we start building and implementing these kind of processes, right? Because what are the actual challenges that we want to solve, right? So we have uncontrolled growth of requirements from multiple angles, multiple systems. Like that's something that we want to look at traditionally. Even still in modern OEM or R&D organization, there's a lot of silos, there's a lack of communication, maybe not even only between software and hardware, but even in hardware, when we, for example, look at design and then simulation or etc. in the same sense, software between testing and development. Often in automotive, or almost always, there's a lot of late changes in design, a lot of rework around the entire product that we're having. We see product costs is going up, a lot of repetitive testing that's required, etc. And then all the OEMs are launching new vehicle platforms in the market, electric, more autonomous, software-based. I mean, that's just waiting to climb defects up in the field, right, etc. So in a nutshell, we see it everywhere. Quality is going down, cost is going up, time to market is increasing. So the question is, what do we do, right? So everybody wants to tackle that. And then I think in our industry, it's super unique since we basically double the complexity in everything we do, because we basically have these two V models of hardware and software that we need to start harmonizing. And that's something where ALM comes in as a tool to basically harmonize everything into a digital thread across hardware and software, starting all the way in the beginning from requirements in the design phase. For example, in Codebeamer, you can collect all your requirements across hardware, software, to really harmonize and get a holistic view on the product. But it's important because now it starts trickling down to an integrated BOM in the design phase, hardware, software, but then also design and development and going into testing. And there, the big question is then, of course, how do we start into an integrated build, right? And how do we link test cases also eventually going into a product release? Of course, that's one common product that consists of software and hardware, right? And ALM can help us here. So now that we look at this field, go back to the challenges that we had and we wanted to tackle. Now the question is, what is the North Star, right? Where do we want to go? So for example, you want to manage your system requirements in a more holistic way, for example, right? Or you want to identify defects a little bit early in the life cycle, also compatibility issues that you're going to face. I mentioned before, often these tools can also be used to trigger consolidation, breaking down those silos, reinforcing collaboration between stakeholders. Obviously, you want to improve product quality, etc., enable a little bit more seamless traceability across the lifecycle. So all these things are opportunities that ALM provides you with. And I think, for your specific use cases, you need to see what are the things that we want to go to, setting the direction. And then you basically start looking at how do we do this, right? And again, here, like a proven framework, PMT, going into the discussion. So now the question is looking at the process, right? So process defines what to be done, right? Not so much the how yet, right? But here the question is, I mentioned before, you don't want to lift and shift everything that you do today just into the new tool, right? So now we basically decouple this a little bit. We go back, we look at sort of what kind of use cases do we have, what kind of user journeys do we have in the organization. We start mapping this out. We're looking where are the interdependencies, all that kind of stuff. And I think what's really, really important to point out is here in these transformations, it's good to always have the engineer or the developer at the center, right? To have them build them in right from the start to find out, okay, how are we doing things today and how can we use the new ALM to do things differently in the future. And then we basically go into the how, the method of each of these processes, each of the tasks, each of the user story that you want to do. We define how can it work differently, right? So there's frameworks that we can do differently. There's governance to establish around to build essentially what's going to be a new common practice across the entire engineering, right? So mentioned before, we don't want to copy paste the flaws of today and whatever we have in the new, right? So that's a really important piece, right? And then only then basically would you ideally start to select the tool. And of course, you will select it based on new functionalities that you want to have, such as you want to enable digital thread or you want to enable automation. infuse more Gen AI, etc., in the way of working. We always think automotive, every OEM is super specific and everything is super specific and different from everyone else. But I mean, if we face it, 80% of whatever an OEM does to develop a software-defined product is somewhat comparable. And all the new tool providers, and I know this also from Codebeamer, provide a lot of templates out of the box, right? So there's the question, what can I use to speed up this transformation so that I don't reinvent everything, right? I consolidate, I leverage what's there. Where these tool providers have also experience from working with many, many OEMs and start seeing and consolidating these kinds of common practices. Right. And then, of course, how does it integrate into your existing landscape? As I mentioned before, all the tools that you've built across the life cycle and development cycle, what do you want to consolidate? Maybe what can this new tool pick up for you? What do you want to keep? How does it integrate? Where does your data sit, etc.? So all these topics need to be taken into consideration. So that phase usually is a lot of benchmarking, also self-assessment. How do we do? Where do we want to go? And that's sort of what we then basically do in this blueprinting or direction setting phase. And then last but not least, mobilization, right? So we go into the implementation, we start looking at the how. And there's a couple of key success factors that we established and found common across all these transformations. And one picking out here a little bit left and right is really executive sponsored buy-in, right? Because these transformations are super large. They will last for 2-3 years. They will require some unpopular decisions. So it's really important that the team or whoever's driving this has really this backing from executive sponsorship. And then the second one is user centricity, as I mentioned. Right? Really have the engineer front and center, bounce everything that you start doing with the engineer and the developers to have something that then is set up for dedication and adoption moving forward. Right, then there's some obvious things that there's really consistent, strict project management, right? Because you want to move this forward. Training, of course, super important because there's a lot of things that are going to be new, right? But you can even consider this training also as a change management on the ground, right? Every time you train, it's not only the tool, but it's also in the process, right? And then learn really fast, continuously improve whatever works, you adapt, whatever doesn't work, you improve, because that's your chance to basically redefine and redesign the processes. And then partnerships, where we see a close cooperation with the tool and the SI partner along the entire journey is really important. And there's a lot of things OEMs can do by themselves. There's a lot of things that basically tool providers such as PTC can do. There's a lot of things that we can support OEMs with. And the big question is who does what. So in this phase, we usually really very clearly map out what's the responsibility of the tool provider, what is the responsibility of the OEM, what's the implementation partner's responsibility, so that we make this very clear who has what responsibility and who's advising where. And then dedicated task force, of course, is another super important topic, because that is the team that is responsible to drive the rollout, drive the adoption, and drive generating value from this massive investment that you're making here. I think I've been a little bit faster than I thought, but maybe we can pick up some questions in the end. But we have one more thing, right? If we look at generating value from the start, right, really in the first steps of the rollout is to immediately leverage the new functions that the tools bring, right? So for example, model-based development or Gen AI functions, when you already start shifting the very first processes to the new solution, right? And one of the examples will now be shown by my colleague Katalin, who's part of the core team who built the requirements checker for Codebeamer, right? And then we can show you a little bit how to mobilize things like this right away. Katalin, do you want to take over?
Yeah. Hi, everyone. Thank you for inviting me. My name is Catalin. I've been part of Accenture since 2019, primarily working on automotive-related projects. I'm based in a city called Cluj in Romania. And now I'm going to talk about and show you something of my experience in writing requirements. If you can move to the next slide. So in one of my roles, I was assigned to a project where the entire team was writing requirements for future generation of vehicles. And this team was always doing training sessions on how to improve better requirements. During this experience, we came up with the idea of generating or using generative AI to assist us in writing better requirements. After we discussed a little bit about this a few weeks later, we already had developed a cloud-based architecture which leverages the endpoints exposed by Codebeamer for checking requirements. And we check these requirements using the ISO norm 29148. This norm talks about how to write requirements in system and software engineering. The value of using this now it's clear. It provides instant feedback, increases trust when writing requirements, and very importantly, in the review process, it reduces the time spent on talking about requirements, and even decreases the number of requirements which are poorly written. But I will conclude with something at the end of this presentation. Thinking about the future and other benefits of using Gen AI, I don't want to talk very much about this here because I have a list of other things we can do later on in the presentation. So if you can move to the next slide, I will try to quickly explain the solution from a user point of view. So what we see here is Codebeamer, and it's the view we have on an item. On the gray bar circled in purple, you see two buttons which we added. The most important out of these two buttons is the review item button. After pressing it, a process starts for reviewing the current item and adding yes or no in the circle fields below. If you look at the picture, these fields are unambiguous, implementation-free, complete, feasible, verifiable, singular. And these are fields that we added. And after the solution completes these fields, it also adds an explanation and a proposal for what it found. And whoever reads the explanation, if agreeing with the proposal, can simply push the other button, the update description button, and everything that was proposed can be moved directly in the description field. Now, if you can move to the next slide. Here we see all the fields populated, and if you remember the previous requirement, the previous requirement said customer request to lower vibration and noise, no sensor noise, and the AI rated as ambiguous, not singular, and not verifiable. And the explanation, if you take a look at the explanation, it says that it's ambiguous because there is no clear defined way to measure what the requirement says, which is correct. It's not singular because it can be split into two different requirements, one talking about the noise and one about the vibration. And it's not verifiable because, again, there is no clear process of how to verify the noise and the vibration, right? So this is just the view of what's happening when reviewing one item. We didn't add it in this presentation because of lack of time, the view for the requirement, but basically we do something similar with it, but for an entire tracker. Now, if you move to my last slide. So building on this experience, we asked ourselves if there are other things where we can improve the software development workflow. After some brainstorm session within the team or together with some of our clients, we came up with a list of potential use cases. You can see part of what we came up with here. Some of these ideas were developed further into POCs, which were then presented to our clients, and some of them even graduated to a state of MVP within some clients' ecosystem. Now, nearly a year, we've been experimenting with AI in various projects and scenarios. And all this time we've played with this technology, we improved skills in areas like prompt engineering and creating long-term memory for AI by vectorizing data from different projects or departments of our clients. The entire journey, I think that today also revealed the positive side effect of adopting new technology, in this case, generative AI. We now see that gradually we organize client data in a way similar to how search engines have been organizing information in the past 2 decades. And with this, every vector we add of our client data in a vector database makes the data more easily to find, more easily to interact. So it makes it accessible and useful. And if you think about what we do with this requirement tracker, imagine this, that now we take one requirement and we check if somebody else in a very big project with a lot of requirements, if somebody else wrote something similar to this, or if the requirement that we just wrote needs an opposite conditional requirement, and if that requirement exists or not in the project. A conclusion is that adopting Gen AI in more use cases like this will basically make us like being able to Google search something, but not on the entire internet, but in our projects and our fields. Thanks for listening.
Oh, thank you very much, Katalin. Let's open up for some questions. So you can scan this QR code if you want to connect on LinkedIn or in any other way. But Toby, I don't know who's moderating this. If we have any questions in the chat, how does it work?
Yes, thank you for sharing a lot of interesting insights in this very hot topic, of course. So let's open up for any questions you might have. You could just put them in the chat or just raise your hand, and we will actually open up for you to talk in the microphone. But I actually had a few questions already here. So one was around let me see here, the first one. I had one here. What is the best way to start a Codebeamer implementation? And who should be, engaged, from the organization? What kind of, specific roles and titles, should be part of, the project sort of?
Yeah, I can take this. So I think it depends a little bit, right, where you are, what you want to achieve. But as I mentioned before, definitely have a dedicated team, a lead assigned to this, backing with C-suite, ideally CTO if possible, right, to really start this, get the attention on it. Then, as I mentioned, engineers. Like if you can assemble sort of like a representative group of engineers across the processes or the development cycle that you want to transform, that is of course also super important. And then sit together with your SI partner and with the tool vendor to really work through like who does what, right? What do you want to do? And one thing that is often forgotten is I mentioned the tool landscape that you already have. Often there's a decision made, okay, I'm going for Codebeamer in this case, but not a lot of discussion has been taking place. Which function will sit where? Which system will start to fade out? Right. So I think getting the system architects engaged really early, and not only, let's say, a software architect or responsible for the software ALM, but everything, right, across the entire R&D, because somebody will have to take some tough calls, right? Where do all these systems on the sites, where will they go? Will they be integrated? Will they connect? Will only data connect? Will some layers have to be created between those systems, right? Because you don't want to fully integrate, and they're too complex to directly attach. Like these kind of decisions are super, super important to start out of the gate, because otherwise you start making a lot of corrective actions later down the process, and that's becoming a big blocker for you to gain speed on this transformation.
Thanks for a really good answer. Right.
Yeah.
Fantastic. I had another one. I mean, also quite interesting, I must say. I mean, how could you actually measure, I mean, the return of investment by implementing an ALM solution?
I mean, the first point is what do you want to achieve again, right? If you want more collaboration, you want faster code defect resolution, if you want whatever process you want to improve, right? So that's something that you need to clearly articulate, right, before you can measure against those things. Then you set up the KPIs and then you start tracking, right? And some very easy KPIs can be how many users are being transformed or moved to the new platform, right? So that's some will always define that as a value, right? But then, of course, the more abstract it becomes, the more difficult to measure. Sort of, are we really launching products earlier, or are we making less defects in the field? That has, of course, many, many different aspects and are not so easy to track. But yeah, I mean, there's like whole concepts and schools of thoughts around how can we measure value for this kind of transformation.
It makes sense, definitely. Another one here, can you actually check the requirements written in Codebeamer with the requirements written outside the Codebeamer?
That's for Katalin.
Yeah. You are muted,
please, can you please repeat the last part of the question?
Sure. Can you check the requirements written in Codebeamer with the requirements written outside the Codebeamer?
So what we did here, it's a tool which integrates some APIs, right? And we take some information from Codebeamer and we send it to a generative AI, which replies to it and so on. So if that integration is also extended to something else, sure.
Right. And a little bit, I mean, maybe related, I mean, to your answer here. I mean, can you change the ISO you use for reviewing to other norms and definitions?
Yeah. So we initially, because our target was to make sure that we write better requirements, we use this norm. But if somebody else, a client, for example, has their own definition of how a norm should look like, and if they have these criteria and they have a definition for that criteria, yes, we can implement that definition also.
Right. And another question here. What are the challenges of integrating ALM with existing engineering workflows?
That's a good question. I mean, technically, the main challenge is really to see what kind of specification you have in your own ecosystem, right? So I think adoption is always a hurdle. I mentioned before, engineers have been working with this for a long, long time, sometimes reluctant to change. Some things that are always good to do that we found is show a little bit the light at the end of the tunnel. So what are some of the really cool features that you get to use that make your life as a designer or engineer much easier? And then really implement using also the backing of those engineers, right? So that really they're part of the process. But that's something, adoption, of course, is one of the main hurdles. And then, of course, the other one is system integration. So whatever system you think you need to keep. You start developing new workflows, and then sometimes you have these loops where you go out into own systems that you have. So the question is, how do you then ensure data integrity between those steps and continuity? Sometimes these loops add a lot of extra time that you wouldn't need if you stay within the flow, but there's obvious reasons sometimes why you need to keep it. But that's something that you need to design the whole process for and make really conscious decisions on with those detriments in mind.
Yeah, thank you. And last question, and maybe that could also hopefully summarize a little bit this session. But how can companies actually stay ahead of the curve by adopting ALM?
The main point of ALM is to get much better, faster processes, increase quality, and increase time to market, right? I think staying ahead of the curve is almost difficult now, right? Because if we look at the Chinese who are starting all these things from scratch, they start with all the newest tools, with all the newest processes, no legacy, right? So that is something that we are now basically getting measured against, right? So staying ahead of that curve is going to be very hard, but basically adopting best practices and doing whatever we can. That's maybe a good way to start. And then continue innovating overall in R&D.
Yeah, thank you. And time is unfortunately running out. So many thanks everyone for joining this session. And of course, a very special thanks to you, Hans and Katalin. And I have another last slide here. Maybe we could flip to that one. Because also, next PTC talks will be on the 20th of December. Same time, of course, for a session about AI-generated manufacturing trainings, boosting quality and productivity by Dr. Elisa Root, who is the CEO of Augmented Industries. So stay tuned with that and have a fantastic weekend, everyone. Take care.
Thank you.
Bye-bye. Bye-bye.
All right.